In working with entrepreneurs now for many years, decade and a half across the US within my financial coaching company, I've found that various situations and factors can influence how business owners decide they want to structure their companies and whether they want to pursue setting up a holding company. I was actually recently sitting on my way back from Florida with a great friend of mine and a recent participant of the Maven Passive Fix and Flip model that we've been featuring now on the channel regularly. And I'll leave some links in the description into that model. I think it's an extremely enticing investment opportunity for people who have capital that they would like what I would consider to be unbelievable rates of return on. And he had rattled off a number of different questions that I simply didn't have exact answers to, or I just wasn't confident in my answers. So I said, you know what? I don't know for sure, Dave, but I know who does. And so today I want to welcome you back to the channel, Abby. This is Abby Broyles. Abby is the owner of LegalSphere and also an attorney who handles the proper turnkey solutions for people that are not just working with Maven, but are also running various companies in other types of income streams and so forth. So business owners that are already operating one or more limited liability company, that are thinking about starting multiple businesses and may ask about holding companies, I just wanted to have this direct conversation with you, as I feel it might benefit some of our audience here that are entrepreneurs or considering becoming an entrepreneur. So let's kind of start things off the top, Abby. What is a holding company exactly?
Yeah, Matthew, it's great to see you. A holding company is essentially just a parent LLC. So we're talking about a limited liability company. Most folks know what that is. So if you're setting up this entity structure, you're thinking of this holding company LLC as essentially a parent company. So that's going to basically manage any sub LLCs you'd have below it. The importance of setting that up is for really just keeping the management structure in place. You're also going to run things through that bank account. You want to think about when you're managing different kinds of properties, having separate sub LLCs, because we talk a lot about on the channel, not commingling your assets. You want to keep separate properties and separate LLCs, especially if you have different kinds of investments. We have a client who recently came to us and had it was kind of a unique situation. He had some oil and gas syndications. He had some passive real estate investments. Then he had an investment in a tortilla chip company. We said those can't all be in one LLC. Those are separate kinds of investments. They're not like kind. So what we did was set up a holding company LLC in Nevada, provide some anonymity, and then we were able to create sub LLCs for that. So a holding company, you just want to think of it as an umbrella LLC. So it's providing that protection, but also creating a management structure so that when you are working on your taxes and that sort of thing, you're able to leverage, if you had profits in one LLC, some losses in the other, you're able to leverage those against each other because they're held under that same umbrella.
So it's really multi-purpose, right? We've got tax benefits as a primary reason of doing it, as well as asset protection, liability limitation, of course, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're always thinking about asset protection. As a lawyer, that's always what I'm thinking about. What is a possibility of you getting sued? What are your liabilities in that case? But also at the end of the day, I mean, folks, especially who are dealing with real estate, especially these passive real estate investments, they're wanting to get some tax breaks because these are just going to be add-ons to their personal income. So at the end of the day, any tax write-offs you can have, fantastic. And we need to create an entity to be able to do that.
Okay. So can holding companies own several, I mean, you've obviously talked about them owning several operating LLCs, but can some be taxed as partnerships and also some be taxed as S corporations? Or is it only, because my understanding is that S corporations are governed by state regulations. So, and state regulations, federal, right? S corps are going to be federal regulations, whereas LLCs are going to be more state oriented.
Yeah, so whenever you're electing how you want to be taxed, when you're thinking about a single member LLC, so one person owning a holding company LLC for, let's say, 4 or 5 different passive real estate investments, maybe they have one active business that they're involved in a separate sub LLC under that umbrella. For that, obviously, that's just going to be in addition to their personal income tax, because you're a single member LLC. Everybody pretty much knows how that works. If you're looking at having an LLC where maybe your spouse is a member, or you have a couple of friends and family who are members, then in that structure, you can also deal with kind of the same tax liabilities. But if you're wanting to, for instance, add one of those folks or maybe one of your kids on payroll, maybe you want to be taxed as an S Corp. And that's when you're going to want to form that sort of structure to be able to do payroll, do other sorts of things where you're able to take more tax deductions. And in that case, you'd also be able to pay yourself a salary. So it kind of depends on what your plans are. You can always start an LLC a certain way. And then we can go back and decide, well, we want to make this an S Corp. So you don't have to, what your election is basically from the beginning doesn't have to be what you stick with. But we want to take a look with our clients about what their long-term goals are, because we love to set people up from the very beginning for what they need at the beginning, but also what it's going to look like in 5-10 years. So we're not having to unwind anything or restart everything, especially if it's something where someone starts a company, they want to keep the name of that LLC. We want to make sure that we have that name in use, because once we have that name in use, it's in the marketplace, then we're able to capitalize on that. We don't have to redo things years down the road. I'm sure you run into that, Matthew, with VIP. You captured, that name years ago. And so now that you have that forever, so we want to keep that active use of the name and the entity in place. So if we can do it from the beginning, that's fantastic.
Okay. Can you kind of walk us through how might somebody change operating LLCs from the ownership of individuals to the holding company LLC? How does that change take place?
So if you are wanting, for example, we have a client recently who has a couple of different LLCs. He has different kinds of investments in those LLCs. He wants to create a holding company LLC so that his wife is a 50% owner of it. So what we did was, first of all, his entities were in a state where they don't offer anonymity. And so they're in Texas. And so what we did was set up an LLC in Nevada that offers anonymity. We're able to set up that umbrella structure where they each have 50% ownership. And then that operating agreement, which is really critical, the operating agreement of that holding company LLC owns then those two LLCs that were already set up in Texas. So we transfer them through the operating agreement. So it's really a lot of paperwork, the short answer to your question, but that operating agreement is critical, and those are critical to every entity, especially whenever you're going to want to be doing different things with it, and it's not just for a single purpose.
Got it. And is this something that people can fairly easily handle on their own? It seems like anytime there's a lot of paperwork involved, it's generally recommended to get an attorney to help with this process. Is that something that you also encourage?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at LegalSphere, what we do is offer packages that are tailored with everything that someone would need to form an LLC. And that includes us drafting a tailored operating agreement. A lot of people will go on places like LegalZoom or something like that, where they just download a standard operating agreement. But there are huge mistakes that people can make in those. Little mistakes like if you don't have it organized in the proper state. I mean, if your physical address of your business is in California, you don't want that California address if you're trying to organize in Nevada for purposes of anonymity, avoiding that $800 a year annual fee in California. So you want to make sure all of that is upfront and correct in the operating agreement. But also certain provisions are really critical when you're looking at whether or not you want to be member managed or manager managed. There's no lawyer on LegalZoom telling you, yeah, you need to do this, and here's your specific situation. Let me take that information and rattle off what you should do. It's really important to talk to an attorney, because just for example, with some of the Maven deals that we do, because I'm counsel for them, we had a deal recently where the owner of our company had another member who was on the loan. Well, the operating agreement at the time, because usually Maven just does this all on its own. This case, though, the bank said, well, we need to see all the members. Banks don't want anonymity. They want to see exactly who's behind the business. So in that case, it was a quick call to me. We amended the operating agreement. We had 2 members to it. We added the provisions on exactly how much ownership they had, what voting rights they had, and we were able to get that taken care of within just a couple of hours. So when you're looking at the operating agreement from the get-go, it's very important to have that in place, especially if you're doing business with other people, but also have it the ability to have kind of an on-demand attorney who's able to make those changes, because as you know, in real estate, you might miss a deal if you aren't able to get everything worked out in that situation. Like I said, we just had that recently where my client was at the bank and we were able to get it fixed and amended so that we were able to get everything processed through.
Yeah, and I will say that we stay in a lot of contact with the people who view our videos and choose to participate in various activities that we may showcase. And the folks that have gotten involved with you and have provided feedback have been thrilled. So I wanted to mention that today. Can you give me a breakdown of what a range of costs might look like for services when it comes to your turnkey services? And I will also mention that one of the things that people consistently say is they really love your accessibility. And I've been very blessed to have a legal team that is also extremely accessible, and I think that that's a huge value add that not everybody has found when going and seeking legal services. So I just wanted to make sure that you heard it firsthand that people are extremely happy with what they've been getting so far. So keep up the great work on that.
Thanks, I appreciate it. Your clients are awesome. They're so enthusiastic, and they've been devoted members of the channel for a year, viewers, and so they're excited to see the opportunities unfold on there, and so we're happy to work with them. One thing I think is unique about LegalSphere is we don't charge membership fees. There are a couple of national firms that charge an upfront membership fee every month you pay, in addition to $4,000 to $5,000 just up front to get on the phone with an attorney. And a lot of times you're going to be talking to a paralegal, a legal assistant. A lot of times they can provide great information, but honestly, we've had some of those clients come to us who have first gone to these national firms, and we've kind of had to unwind some of the stuff that they've been doing. For instance, we had a client who was actually a VIP referral. He was set up with a holding company LLC, but had all of his investments commingled. So anything from rental properties to some passive investments, they were all lumped together, which is an absolute awful situation to be in, because as you know, if you have a rental property, that's a much higher liability risk than if you just have one of these passive real estate investments. So got him set up with a new entity structure. That was very helpful for him, and it's affordable. So our packages start with a basic package at $1,500 for the legal fees. That includes all the setup, an hour of attorney consultation after their free consultation. It also includes an operating agreement, an EIN number, and then after that, you get a discount on any hourly work after that. So let's say you want to set up an LLC. Later on, you want to do an arbitrage agreement. We work with our existing clients to offer more discounted rates. So you aren't paying some big retainer up front. Instead, you're paying for a specific package that's everything you need to take to the bank to open that business checking account and be able to operate your business if this is your first investment or if it's your 15th.
That's very reasonable. But you guys start off with an initial consultation, is my understanding. That's at least what you've been doing from our first conversation. We had a previous call that people responded very well to. And as I mentioned, a lot of folks coming into the Maven projects are certainly reaching out to you too. So they'd all spoken very highly about the consultation. No strong arming, no hard sales approach. Obviously, that's something that we find very important here on our channel. We definitely are not fans of that dynamic, and you seem to fit the mold really, really well. I had jotted down a couple other questions here for you. Before I do this, let me give the email address for anybody that might be thinking about getting structures set up. If you feel like you might be underprotected, if you don't necessarily feel like you have your ducks in a row when it comes to tax time, you can reach out to structure@vipfinancialeducation.com. That's structure@vipfinancialeducation.com. Throw it on the screen and in the description below as well for you guys. Put your first name, last name, and phone number in that email so that Abby can reach out or have somebody from her team contact you directly in order to set up that initial consultation with you to determine whether or not you have all of your gaps filled. I think it's an incredibly important part of effectively running a business. It's something that frankly isn't a lot of fun. It kind of falls into that insurance category, which nobody really likes to have to go through with it. It's a pain to get it set up. It's oftentimes more expensive than we wish it was. And yet, the alternative in a worst case scenario is certainly not going to be what's preferred. So make sure that you are protecting yourselves and getting as many tax benefits as possible. as you grow your businesses. So a couple questions that I had written down that David brought up with me, Abby, that I just wanted to take note of here. So how does somebody pay themselves from their holding company?
So the holding company LLC, if you are a single member, you're just looking at additional income to your personal income taxes. So that'll be just an additional form on your personal income taxes. If you are doing an LLC with a friend or family member, at the tax season, what you're going to be able to issue to your members is a K1. So when everyone gets those, that's when they'll be able to get their share. And obviously that's according to that operating agreement, which is so important to include how much membership holdings they have. And that's what documents all of that. So that happens once a year. What we do at LegalSphere is send out reminders about all of those things to do leading up to tax season, and also remind people throughout the year in our newsletters, here's some tax write-offs you can use and how best to work with the other members in your LLC to make sure that you're taking advantage of all of those.
Okay, very helpful. So the holding company does have an EIN, correct?
Yes, the holding company has an EIN number. And for those who don't know what that is, it is basically just a way to keep track of your credit through the government with this specific number. Think of it as your business's social security number. So whenever you set that up, you're able to build business credit from it. If you want to open up credit cards to be able to put business expenses on it, all of that gets reported back to the credit bureau according to your EIN number. So that's why it's so important to start that from the beginning. A lot of people think, yeah, if I start a business, I'm going to be able to build business credit and my personal credit doesn't matter. Well, that's not true. Most of the time when you're trying to take out a loan, you're always having to do a personal guarantee. But if you're starting with the very specific things that we set people up with, which is that LLC formation, the operating agreement, the EIN number, you're starting to build that credit. It's so helpful, especially if you're wanting to go out and borrow money in the future because you have created a profile to the rest of the world. Here's what my company is worth, and here is, how sound it is, and here's the credit that we've been able to build up through, X number of years of having been in business. And I know this is one thing you talk about a lot, Matthew, so jump in whenever you want. What works best with your clients that you see as far as building business credit? Is it opening up business credit cards? Is it something else? Because there are a lot of scams out there as well. We hear about that from our clients a lot.
Absolutely. I mean, my experience is that without 2 years worth of seasoned history of that registration being filed with the Secretary of State for an EIN number, you're going to be limited on what types of capital would be available to you from a business credit standpoint. Business credit cards are often available right away. Most of the companies that I've opened up, I was able to get a business credit card immediately without any documented history of income. So, often I would recommend somebody start that because we want to isolate the business credit spending, assuming that there are costs involved within that business, whether it be costs like yours through LegalSphere Group, whether it be costs of marketing, business cards, a website, even just the cost of the registration, which you can't obviously put on a business credit card you don't yet own under an EIN that doesn't yet exist. However, having that business credit card allows you to isolate the expenses of that particular business to that specific transaction history. And I just find that a lot easier for the end of year bookkeeping process. Is it absolutely critical? No. You can get around it. A lot of people use personal credit cards when they're just getting their businesses started. It just makes that commingling and separation process a lot more convoluted and confusing. And personally, I just think creating an organized structure from the beginning helps people a great deal moving forward. So yeah, we can get into a business credit conversation at some point because I think it would really be helpful for people to understand the depths behind that and what these structures can allow people to do further in terms of accessing capital and further liquidity, and maybe even open up additional investment opportunities because of it. But it is a conversation in and of itself. It's a great question. I do think that no matter what, once you set up an EIN through LegalSphere Group, taking the effort to go out and open up a credit card or two in that business name is well worth it. Now, most of the time, just in that EIN, that employer identification number is not going to actually report to your personal credit report. So any of my business credit cards are actually invisible from my personal credit report. While they would actually probably help the scores because they're paid to zero each and every month, it is still nice that you can create a level of sort of anonymity in terms of the business that if there is increased spending or there are anomaly months where you're picking up equipment or you have larger purchases that end up on that credit card, if it isn't paid to zero that specific month, your personal credit scores aren't going to take a hit. So I like the fact that it's actually invisible. So do you know whether or not holding companies require insurance? That was another question that David asked that I thought might be helpful to the audience.
My attorney answer is it depends. That is my answer to a lot of things. But it depends on what kind of real estate investments you have. So,
or business in general, right? Because this isn't all just this. I'm sorry to cut you off there, but this isn't all just real estate investing, right? So it depends on what type of business or industry you're in as a whole, or it also depends in terms of the type of real estate investing specifically that you're doing. Is it both? Where it depends?
it depends on what kind of business that you have. If you have a brick and mortar business, of course, you need to have insurance for that holding company LLC. If you're talking about strictly real estate, let's say you have rental properties, always want to have insurance. And even then, you're still at risk of liability, which is why we have extra asset protection measures that we take with our rental property owners, because that's just a higher risk kind of investment to have. With passive real estate investment, and it's a little bit different. And that's where I think that in some cases you don't need insurance. You're not running an active business. Anytime you're running an active business with a holding company LLC, yes, you need to have insurance. Absolutely.
Okay, that makes sense to me. So why would investors at times not like LLCs? I find that interesting. What would be some of the reasons that you've heard investors might not like LLCs?
I think the most common thing I hear is just they don't want to pay for the upfront costs. You have to pay the filing fees depending on what state that you're looking at. In California, it's very expensive. It's $800 to file. And the renewal fee is about the same. So you're looking at that. If you don't live in the state where you want to be organized, you have to pay a registered service agent fee. We do a lot of our entities in Nevada. There, on average, the filing fees with the registered agent fee and just Nevada's Secretary of State filing fees, it's almost $600. When you look at it at the end of the day, though, providing that asset protection and also having those extra tax write-offs is so critical, because especially if this is just getting tacked on to your personal income for the year, if you don't have extra write-offs like your legal fees, like being able to write off some of your accounting fees, like being able to write off some of your business entertainment expenses when you're taking friends and family out talking about these investment deals, you're going to, at the end of the day, be paying more money to the IRS instead of having more money in your pocket. So that's really critical. And there really are cost-effective ways of forming these entities without having to form 15 LLCs. And I think that's the other thing I hear a lot is, well, Abby, do I have to put each property in a separate LLC? It really depends on what you're trying to accomplish. If you are just doing passive real estate investments, maybe we set up a series LLC. We can do that in some place like Nevada or Wyoming that offers anonymity. In a series LLC, it's similar to a holding company LLC. It's the parent umbrella LLC. And then each time you want to add a property, we add, it's called either a cell or a child LLC underneath that parent series LLC. It's very easy to do. You don't have to record those child or cell LLCs to most states. But then there are some other disadvantages of a series LLC, because only about 20 states in the country recognize those. So if you're an active business, if you're trying to expand your business into other states, maybe you want to go with the holding company LLC option, because those are recognized everywhere. You don't want to set up a series LLC, try to break into a different state that doesn't recognize it or has a horrible law that's anti-business, and then you're stuck with having to unwind all of that and just set up a whole holding company umbrella LLC when we could have done that from the beginning. So that's why it's so important to talk to an attorney, to talk to your tax preparer, and really see what's best for you. And I say more than just an attorney, because it's a team. When you look at this at the end of the day, it's you, your partners, if you have any, it's your tax preparer, it's your lawyer. How can you best set up your opportunities to be successful?
Well, you took the words out of my mouth. I couldn't agree more. I mean, every time we speak, I think you just simply reinforce the nuances that go into this, whether it be the industry you're in, the type of business you're operating inside of that industry, specifically real estate in this case, you know, the state you live in, there's a lot of different factors and logistics that are going to determine the best route for your individual circumstances. So I couldn't agree more. I think at least having an initial conversation, it doesn't cost any money, takes just a small amount of time, is well worth the effort just to make sure that you're protected first and foremost. So guys, you could reach out to Abby and her team at structure@vipfinancialeducation.com. Make sure you spell that all out. Structure@vipfinancialeducation.com. Include a first, last name, and a direct contact number so that they can get in touch with you and answer some of your specific questions. I always forget questions when we do these interviews. Most of the questions that I've written down here are FAQs that I hear more often, and I think simplifying the process so that you can sort of keep things more on a repeat basis. For example, I put $100,000 into a Maven deal over the summer. It's expected to pay out roughly $39,000 in just a 6-month period of time. I have yet to see many, if any at all, of these Maven deals produce less than a 25% return on the loans that our audience are contributing to those projects in, on average, a 6-month timeline or less. So if you annualize it out, we're looking at 50% ROIs on loans that are provided. As participants, you have a minimum obligation of $50,000 or more to get involved in those, but that money can come from anywhere. So people are tapping into a lot of what we've taught for the last 11, 12 years by way of using debt weapons and borrowing other people's money, OPM, in order to get involved and allow the bank's money or allow friends and family's money to work on their behalf. And by leveraging their way up, you can sort of leapfrog your way to wealth versus trying to do things purely organically by using what in most households has become a very limited amount of net cash flow each and every month due to inflation going up, due to high interest rates on non-mortgage related consumer debts. I mean, credit card rates are through the roof at this point. Auto loan rates are through the roof. Just a trip to the grocery store seldom costs me less than $100, even when I'm just trying to get in and out. So at this point, it's tough to simply survive, much less collect enough money at the end of each month to where you can make any significant amount of progress investing. You almost have to get into a form of leveraging to make some of this stuff work. I just want to encourage people to at least know that if you're going into something, into these projects, find a way to keep it as efficient as possible. And usually hiring someone like Abby doesn't have to be LegalSphere Group. I certainly have found you guys to be ideal for various reasons. And I'm sure there are people that would be considered direct competitors of yours that would offer similar services for similar rates that are of similar quality, but they're few and far between, and they're not easy enough to find to where I'm easily cherry picking them out. I always have a very difficult time coming across top quality service providers, and I've found that in you guys. So I highly suggest everybody at least get that initial consultation, because just hiring Abby or her team or any other company that does a great job for a fair price will ultimately end up saving you so much more money than you otherwise would have spent by either doing it wrong or not doing it all, or ending up with a problem that lands you in court. And in that case, you're going to be ponying up some serious cash. And if it's done right, I find that efficiency is there to where on these Maven projects, if I do it correctly, if I set up an LLC or a holding company and that project is seen through to completion, I assume I can just simply reuse that same holding company for the next project that I get involved with, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And when you're looking at these like-kind investments, you're able to put those into the same entity. Once you get done with one project, 6 months later, sure, use the same LLC to get into the next one. It's when we commingle things like rental properties with oil and gas syndications, with other passive real estate investments, that's when we get into trouble and really need to think about separating things. And that's why this umbrella structure, whether it's a series LLC or a holding company LLC, why that's really beneficial to a lot of people who want to be serious investors. And to your point earlier, we may not be the best fit for everybody. If you want to try to do things yourself online, if you want to hire a local firm, that's up to you. We really try to work with investors who take this seriously, because we look at things not just the first transaction, we look at what their portfolio is going to look like 5, 10 years from now. And that's why we're talking today about umbrella structures and that sort of thing, because we want to make sure that investors are set up to be able to easily add entities, and they're not having to unwind anything. We had a client recently who had his money tied up in a Roth IRA, was trying to get in on a Maven deal, actually had to set him up an LLC at the very last minute to be able to get the funds wired in time by closing day. And no one needs that kind of stress. So if we're able to help you get that structured properly, it makes the Maven process for sure, but also just your other investments so much easier to do when you're buying, leasing, or selling real estate with an entity.
Well, that's fantastic information. I want to thank you again for your time. We certainly appreciate you spending some of your valuable time answering these questions, because this is a complicated topic. You know, it's a lot like the accounting topic. It's just confusing to most of us. So you've certainly cleared up a lot of these FAQs, and we'll be excited to bring you back on. And anytime I keep adding to my list, I'm going to reach out and drag you back onto the channel to help these folks out. So thank you again. I do appreciate you guys. One last time, if you want some assistance in double checking your circumstances, simply email structure@vipfinancialeducation.com. and include a first name, last name, and direct contact number so that Abby or her team can get in touch with you. So Abby, until next time, let's wish everybody a farewell. And I always say, make it a great day, guys, and keep on cash flowing.